Now, today marks 1 year since the Wall Street Journal reporter, journalist Evan Gershkovich, was detained by Russia while on assignment. Now, he's been accused of being a spy. The 32-year-old reporter has never been formally charged or had a trial. Yet on Tuesday, just Tuesday this week, he was ordered to remain in prison for another 3 months at the request of Russia's security service. Now, this case reminds us all, I think, of the jailing of Australian journalists like Peter Grester and Cheng Lei, our Sky colleague, both jailed under bogus charges over the last decade. Now, for more, I'm joined by Professor Greg Barton from the Deakin Institute for Globalisation and Citizenship. Great to catch up with you again, Greg. Evan is reportedly holding up pretty well, given the circumstances. Apparently, the US ambassador in Moscow visits him every few weeks. But it can't be easy when you get no trial, you've not been charged with anything, and you're just locked up.
That's right, Steve. It's a dreadful situation. Evan is 32 years old, so he's young and fit and appears to still be in good health. The fact that his case is such high profile, he's the first journalist, American journalist, to be arrested in Russia since the end of the Cold War. So it was, quite a bolt out of the blue. That high-profile case means that perhaps he's a little bit safer, but given the way Vladimir Putin's Russia is today, given the terrible disinformation and claims that are being made in the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, these allegations that Evan Gershkovich is engaged in espionage, the American government at the highest level has completely refuted. He's never been in a government office. He's always been a journalist. So it's just a dreadful situation.
So, Greg, in the case of Cheng Lei, I mean, the Australian government, they always said, just keep the temperature down. We're working in the background here to get her release. And we're very lucky to have her working here with us at Sky. But this bloke's an American. So, and he works for a high-profile newspaper, one of the most respected papers in the world, the Wall Street Journal, owned by News Corp. He's got a lot of heavy hitters behind him wanting him to be released. Why are the Russians being so stubborn with Evan?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Steve. Clearly, they're looking to use him as leverage at some point. They will, when he's eventually released, perhaps we'll understand the story better. It's nothing to do with him personally, as far as we know. Yes, his parents were emigres from the Soviet Union, Jewish Russian family. He grew up speaking Russian at home, and his fluency in Russian meant that his reporting on everyday life in Russia was very compelling. But none of that makes him a target. In the case of Cheng Lei, and that was another terrible case, but we do know in the case of China that if you're considered to be a dual national, if you're born in China, as far as the government's concerned, you're always a dual national, no matter what other citizenship you may claim. That makes you very vulnerable. We haven't seen that pattern with Russia in the same way. This is a little bit more like people being taken political hostage in Iran, where we've seen a strong pattern of people being held until some sort of trade can be done. That seems to be what's going on here.
I think we're all very shocked about that terrorist attack that took place last weekend in Moscow at that rock concert. And we've now got 4 blokes charged over the concert hall attack. So far, we know 137 people have been killed. More are still recovering in hospital. The shocking images show, the fact that these terrorists just went into this concert hall and opened fire. What do we know about the branch of ISIS that is claiming this? Is it ISIS 7? What do we know about them, Greg?
Yeah, Steve, it's been claimed both officially through the ISIS official leadership and through their media channel that this is an ISIS attack. Vladimir Putin has acknowledged it's an Islamist terrorist attack. The speculation is this ISIS Khorasan province, which is to say the region of Afghanistan, but also of Central Asia and eastern Iran, or is it organized by ISIS in the Caucasus, the North Caucasus in Russia? And those details are not clear. But the threat that's been posed over the last 2 years across Russia and Europe, often involving Central Asian members of ISIS Khorasan, ISK, that's been the main threat for external attacks by ISIS. So the assumption is this was ISIS Khorasan. even if the central leadership wants to downplay that aspect and just emphasize that ISIS is back in the game of international attacks. And yeah, it's a shocking attack. Talking about Evans reporting for the Wall Street Journal, he was reminding us that ordinary Russians are leading ordinary lives, people just like us. These are the victims of these sort of terrorist attacks. We'll talk separately about Vladimir Putin and his awful regime, but these were ordinary people on a Friday night going to listen to a classic rock concert in a crowded auditorium, a big place, 6,500 people, when 4 men came in with assault rifles and opened fire in a cold-blooded fashion, killing and maiming as many as they could, and then setting fire to the building, which of course then collapsed, killing more.
We see ISIS, we know, in the Middle East when ISIS was operative at its peak and it was attacking defence assets and defence bases and trying to kill American soldiers. But what was to be gained by shooting innocent Muscovites at a rock concert? I mean, I can't understand why that target was chosen.
Well, the target was Russia in general, Steve. And of course, these people, think everything justifies the means. It's an awful apocalyptic mentality that they want to bring on a confrontation at the end of times. And they're angry with Russia, ISIS in general, ISIS-K in particular, because of Russia's support for Bashar al-Assad in Syria. In 2015, the Russian Air Force came in and saved his regime. And of course, before that, there was a history of Russian occupation of Afghanistan, 2 terrible wars in Chechnya, and a long history of persecution of Russian minority Muslim populations in the North Caucasus, but also Russian atrocities in Central Asia. So this group, ISIS-K, has a lot of Central Asian members, particularly from Tajikistan, which is the northern neighbor of Afghanistan. And there are at least 10 million Central Asians working in Russia, probably many more without documentation, playing a vital role in the Russian economy, but they're treated often in a very miserable way. There's a lot of racism and persecution. So for recruiters, although most of these Central Asians, of course, are not extremists at all, but they're the victims of recruiters going after people like these 4 gunmen who are allegedly Tajiks. The logic is they're attacking the world. I mean, Russia's at the top of the list along with America. They've tried attacks in Europe. France has just put their security level on the highest rating 3 months out for the Olympics because there's been attempts of ISIS-K to launch attacks in France, and so that's a really pressing concern in the months to come. There is no humane logic in attacking ordinary civilians, but that is what terrorism is about. It's about provoking a response, generally from states that you have an issue with, so that in their response, you can sort of amp things up. That's what happened with the 9/11 attacks. That's what's been happening these last 20 years. That's what happened with ISIS when it was at the height of its powers with the caliphate. And it looks like they're getting back to that position. They're not as strong as they were, but they're sort of signaling that they're back in the business of international attacks.
I hadn't thought of that big target of the Olympics. Greg Barton, always great to catch up with you. Thank you very much for your time.